The army came at dawn. Seraphine felt them before she heard them. A tremor in the stone, the particular rhythm of 10,000 boots finding their cadence on the ancient road. She had learned to read the mountain's memory long ago, back when the road itself was new, when she and Altheric the Younger had walked it together and laughed about how straight the engineers had made it. Like an arrow aimed at your front door, he had said, and she had puffed smoke at him, and he had coughed and called her insufferable. She rose from the warmth of the nest. 3 eggs. 2 the deep amber of sunset. 1 the pale silver green of a new leaf in spring. She pressed her snout against each in turn, a habit, not a necessity. She could feel their heartbeats from across the chamber. But she pressed her snout against them anyway, because the world outside was full of swords this morning, and she wanted the weight of this moment. Alive, alive, alive. She left the inner sanctum and climbed toward the summit gate. The great hall was hers by right of blood and fire, though not the blood and fire anyone would assume. The dwarves who had carved this mountain had been meticulous craftsmen and devoted servants of something that had no proper name in any language Seraphine had ever spoken. Something that lived below the below, that wanted the passage opened, that promised the dwarves elevation in exchange for excavation. She had smelled the wrongness of it from 50 leagues away. A rot beneath the rock. A heat that was not warmth. Altheric had been young then. His father had asked her, in the formal way, the way that acknowledged what she was and what the asking cost. Will you go? She had gone. The battle in the deep tunnels had lasted 11 days. She did not like to remember it. She remembered it anyway. She had no choice. Dragons forgot nothing. They were built for remembering. It was their gift and their particular cruelty. She remembered the dwarves who had wept as they fought her, who had tried to warn their brothers and been silenced. She remembered sealing the lower passage with her own fire, poured into the stone until the stone itself changed, became something that would not open again. She remembered dragging herself back up to the summit gate, half her scales scorched black from the inside out, and finding Altheric waiting with his hands clasped and his face doing the thing it did when he was frightened and trying not to be. You look terrible, he had said. She had collapsed on the road and slept for 9 days. When she woke, the mountain was hers. He had drawn up the deed himself, laughing at the absurdity of it. A legal document conveying title to a mountain from one king to one dragon. She had kept it. It was somewhere in the treasure room. She knew exactly where, if she thought about it, which she tried not to, because thinking about it led to thinking about Altheric, and then about his daughter Ilia, who had visited twice and been terrified both times, but come back anyway. And then about Ilia's son who had stood in this very hall as a very small boy and asked her if she would teach him to fly, and she had looked at his small soft arms, and, well, she had not always been alone up here. The army stopped at the base of the mountain. Sensible. She watched from the summit gate as their officers arranged them into formation. Archers in the rear, heavy infantry at the vanguard, siege weapons being dragged into position with the slow misery of horses who knew a bad idea when they were pulling one. She was tired. Not in her body. Her body was fine. All things considered, 512 years of accumulated wear and 2 scorched ribs that ached in cold weather, but nothing that diminished her. She was tired in the way that had no good word in the humans' jumbled English. She had heard humans say world-weary and thought that came close, though it was not quite right. It was more that the world kept asking her to do things she had already done, and she was tired of that particular repetition. She had not eaten a person in her life. She had not wanted to. The taste was not the point. The point was that Altheric had been a person, and Ilia had been a person, and the small boy who had wanted to learn to fly had been a person, and she was not in the habit of eating things she might someday love. But the army below did not know that. The army below knew a dragon lived in the mountain, and that dragons were evil, and that this particular dragon had been killing knights for decades. Which was true. She had. She had also been defending herself and her home, and, for the past 6 months, 3 eggs whose heartbeats she could feel from a kilometer away, but she had no way to explain that. This was the thing that had gotten worse as the centuries passed. There had been a woman. She no longer remembered her name. She had only met her twice. Who could translate? Not fluently, not comfortably, but enough. Enough to say, She says she will not attack unless threatened. She says the Western Road is safe passage. She says she remembers your grandfathers, and she asks after his health. That woman's grandchildren were dead. Their grandchildren's grandchildren were dead. The skill had passed with them, generation by generation thinning, until there was simply no one left who spoke the right language, and Seraphine had been left with roaring. She roared beautifully. She knew this. It communicated nothing useful. A herald rode forward, alone, which she respected. She watched him compose himself at the mountain's foot and lift a scroll. His voice was strong and clear, and she heard every word with perfect precision. The kingdom of Valdemir. His Majesty King Sorcery III. The dragon who had terrorized the northern passes. The 37 knights who had been lost. A final demand: depart or be destroyed. Seraphine sat with her full weight on the summit gate and thought about Sorcery III. She had no memory of a Sorcery III. She had a memory of an Sorcery I. Young man, pale, serious, had come to the mountain on some diplomatic errand she could no longer recall the specifics of. She had been careful. She had been still, which was the only thing she could do that humans reliably interpreted as non-threatening. He had been polite. He had left. That had been 60 years ago. She thought about the 37 knights. She had not wanted to kill them. She wanted to be clear about this, in her own mind, because there was no one else to be clear to. She had not wanted to kill a single one of them. She had tried, with the first few, to make herself small, or smaller, as much as she could, and to retreat, and to signal with every piece of body language available to her that she was not the aggressor here. But they had come into her halls. They had come near the inner sanctum. One of them, for years ago, had actually found the door. She had not killed him. She had picked him up in her teeth very carefully by the back of his armor, the way she would have carried an egg, and carried him to the summit gate and set him down with elaborate gentleness, and given him her very best please leave expression. He had fainted. His companions had assumed she was playing with her food. They had attacked. She had defended herself. This was the 37th iteration of this story. She was beginning to find it exhausting. She descended the mountain road. She did not breathe fire. She moved as slowly as she could manage while still moving, which for a creature of her size still looked, she knew, like an avalanche with opinions. She stopped 30 meters from the herald, who had gone extremely still on his horse. The horse was making sounds she chose not to focus on. She looked at the army. She thought, I don't want to do this. She thought, there are 3 heartbeats in the mountain behind me. She thought, Altharic, I wish you could see what a mess your descendants have made of things. She lowered her head, slowly, slowly, until it was level with the herald. She looked him in the eyes. He was young. He was terrified. He had the kind of face that suggested he had not signed up for this particular morning. She exhaled. Not fire. Just breath. Warm, sulfur-edged, honest. He flinched and held his ground, which she respected enormously. She turned her head toward the mountain. She turned it back. She did this several times. She was aware she probably looked deranged. She kept trying. Look at the mountain. She could not say. It is stone. It has been stone for 9,000 years. Before I came it was a wound in the world, bleeding wrongness into the groundwater. I sealed it. I stayed. Who was going to stay? Who else was going to remember what it cost? I am not your enemy. I have never been your enemy. Your great-great-great-grandfather's great-great-grandfather shook my hand in this very field, and we meant it. Both of us. It meant something, and now I am standing here, trying to look harmless, which is the funniest joke I have told in 3 centuries. I have eggs. I have eggs, and they are small, and their hearts are beating, and I cannot explain to you how long I waited, how many years of silence it took before I believed enough in the future to make one. Please. The herald swallowed. He rolled his scroll back up, slowly. His eyes moved across her face, her posture, the angle of her wings, the way someone looks when they are trying very hard to read something in a language they almost recognize. Almost. She waited. From somewhere in the army, a bowman's nerve broke. The arrow was not a good shot. It glanced off her left shoulder and clattered against the stone. It did not hurt. It also did not matter, because the sound of it was a word everyone present understood, and the word was begin. Seraphine closed her eyes for one breath. She thought of Altharic laughing on this road. She thought of 3 heartbeats. She opened her eyes, and she turned, and she went back up to defend what was hers, which had always been hers, which had been given in love and maintained in grief, and which she would hold until the stone itself forgot why it had been sealed. The army followed. She was ready. She was so tired of being ready. In the treasury, between a dwarven war axe and a broken crown, there is a water-stained document. The ink has faded, but the seal remains, a mountain and a wing intertwined. No one in the kingdom of Valdemir can read the old script anymore. If they could, it would say, "Let it be known that in grateful acknowledgement of services rendered, in the matter of the Underdark Passage and the sealing thereof, the crown grants to Seraphine, called the Ashen, called the Wise, called, affectionately, she insists, the insufferable, full and permanent title to the mountain of Velashar and all holdings therein, in perpetuity. Witnessed and signed, Altharic Vel, second of his name, in the 31st year of his reign." The dragon witnessed it too. Her signature is a single careful claw mark, because she was still learning to write that year, and Altharic teased her about it for the rest of his life. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and subscribe to see more like it in the future.